So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our new setup, new kind of meeting where we're going to discuss a book with the author. And it's a little more going to be interactive in the second half. The first half is going to be a bit like a fireside chat, although Radhika is going to give us an overview of the book as well. So if you could keep your questions until a bit later, because I'm going to, normally we don't record the questions that the audience makes. We just record my interaction with you, and then once we open it up to the audience, we're going to stop the recording. That's how we typically do it. Okay, so Radhika, it's a pleasure to have you today, and I'm really excited about you telling us about your book because I've been reading it. I haven't finished every single word, but it's been very interesting to me in particular. So,
and thank you for having me here. I'm just super excited to be here. As I was saying earlier, before people join, there are just so many MIT references. And for me, just coming out of MIT, there have been a lot of it, this whole idea of engineering change, it really hit me because of the MIT education, wanting to think like an engineer in how we create change and trying to be systematic about it. So I'm super excited that this is a session with MIT alumni.
Great. So I thought we would start by you telling us the story of how your book got started. In fact, there's always a story behind a book, and so while you tell that story, I know we'll learn a little bit more about you. So if you want to start with a little bit about that story and you, right? Tell us about you and the story of your book before we get into the details.
Yeah. So, the background for the book was just my experience with product diseases. Sorry, on chat, people are suggesting, can everyone please mute yourself because there seems to be a lot of background noise. Thank you so much. I think, Bill, that might be from yours, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, thank you so much. Okay. Bill, I think you're still unmuted. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so graduating from MIT, that was when I started my first company. And in fact, we called it Lobby 7. And yay, you guys will appreciate the name. So we called it Lobby 7. And, that was the first time I had experienced a product disease. The product disease that we'd caught was what I now call hero syndrome. And I'll talk about that in a moment in my presentation. But basically, it was the first time I had experienced a product disease. But what I found was, as I had later worked in other companies, and this was across so many different industries and sizes of companies, I just kept running into the same set of product diseases just over and over. And so what led me to radical product thinking was this, basic question. Is it just that there are a few, visionaries that people know of, like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, who can build these world-changing products, and the rest of us are just doomed to figuring this out through trial and error? Or can anyone really learn to build visionary products very systematically? Can we engineer change through our products? That was kind of a key question that came up maybe 5 years ago or so. And some of my background and what really drove me to write this book, right, is I came to MIT as an international student. I was born in India, I lived in India till I was 12, then I lived in South Africa, and then I came here as an undergrad. And, that is one theme that you really see in the book, which is that you'll see this global perspective. I'm just so tired of most business books that are written by tech bros, for tech bros, that really share this Silicon Valley centric view of the world. It was really time to share a very different perspective that showed, that visionaries can come from all over the world and how there are world-changing products being built in other countries. And so my examples, I very purposefully picked them from just around the world that really kind of brought in that global perspective.
Great. Thank you. So do you want to dive in a little bit into your book for a while, and then sort of then we can sort of move on to more additional questions after you go through that. That way everybody can appreciate it because they haven't all read it yet.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful. Okay, I'll share my screen and let me know if you can see it.
I can see it perfectly.
Okay, great. So a lot of the ideas in this book, I challenge conventional thinking. And why do I challenge them? It's because conventional thinking and just what we've learned about how we should be building products and scaling our companies, it's all about, well, we should think of fail fast, learn fast. Maybe you need to move fast, break things. But above all, what we've learned is you have to iterate quickly. And what we've learned is, if you do these three things just right, then you stand to make lots of money and build successful products and successful companies, right? The one common theme that I kept hearing throughout, since we built that startup Lobby 7 from our dorm rooms in Baker, the one theme that has been running in my career, what I've kept hearing is iterate until you find product market fit. That's kind of how we've learned to build products. And we've learned that you have to keep iterating and pivoting until you delight customers, right? The reality is we really have to call bullshit on it. And it's just such high time to do that. It's because the reality is iteration gives you the equivalent of a fast car. So I'm not criticizing iteration per se, because it's wonderful if you have a Ferrari or a McLaren, good for you. It does give you speed and execution. But the problem is, driving fast and having that fast car is only useful when you really know where you're going. And what has happened so far is in the last decade or so, there have been methodologies such as lean and agile. And these methodologies have really promised to democratize innovation. And what has happened is those have helped us iterate faster. They've helped us, just drive faster, right? We've invested all this time in our Ferraris and McLarens. What hasn't kept pace is our ability to set a very clear destination and navigate to it, meaning our ability to have a clear vision and strategy. That part, hasn't really kept pace. And until now, all the business books and methodologies that I've found, right, they talk about either inspirational level of, yes, you need a vision. That's the example of Start With Why, which is a good book, but it talks about the high level of, yes, you need a vision, but not the practicalities. And then there are other books that, really focus on using speed and trial and error. What I really wanted to, my burning question was, how do we create change systematically? And the need for this really arose for me because of product diseases. As I mentioned, I kept seeing the same set of diseases. And so I want to share some examples of these diseases, from my own background. And I would love it if you would share if you've seen some of these diseases. So please, in chat, as I talk about these diseases, please feel free to just share if you've seen them, right? So this first one is hero syndrome. So I mentioned to you, my first startup, Lobby 7, that was where we had caught hero syndrome. When I, mentioned hero syndrome, like basically we were all about scaling, going big. It was go big or go home, right? And we were conflating just raising VC funding with finding product market fit. And this hero syndrome happens when we're so focused on scale and going big that we really forget what is that problem that we're setting out to solve. And one very common symptom of hero syndrome is having this big vision. And our vision at the time, right, was to revolutionize wireless. And that, I look back at that and feel like, that didn't have that much meaning. And I'll talk about vision in a bit and what I mean by that. But that was hero syndrome. So if you've seen that, please feel free to share that in chat. This next disease is obsessive sales disorder, right? And this is one that I've caught myself, and not only caught, I've even contributed to this one myself. This disease happens, when your salesperson comes to you with a glimmer in their eye and they say, if you just add this one custom feature for this client, we'll win this big mega client. And it sounds mostly harmless. So you say, okay, let's do this. And pretty soon, your salespeople are opening champagne and you're sitting with a stack of contracts and your entire roadmap is driven by what you have to make good on, right? That's obsessive sales disorder. It's when we keep trading off the short term or rather, we continue to try to, make short term gains and give up on the longer term vision. This next disease, right, is what I call strategic swelling. So strategic swelling is what happens when your product continues to grow and grow and grow until you just can't recognize it anymore. It happens when your product actually starts out really well, then your customer says, oh, if you just add this other feature to it, I could also use it to do this. And another customer thinks, oh, I could also use it to do this. And so you try to do everything for everyone. And in the end, like, you just don't, it's so bloated, you don't recognize it, right? That's strategic swelling. Feel free to share if you've seen this one. And this one more disease that I'll talk about, it's become so common, especially as it's become easier and easier to be data-driven. We all know we have to be data-driven. It's become this thing where you have to measure everything, test everything, because we can, right? And one of the problems with this is it leads to hypermetricemia, because we get so obsessed with metrics and analytics that we don't even think about, are we measuring the right things in the first place? So what I found is when we keep iterating without a really clear vision and strategy, we keep running into these product diseases. And iteration alone is not enough, because what it gives you is speed. And speed can look like this, where we're all moving in different directions. And this is where you'll appreciate this good physics analogy with me, which is that, what we really want is velocity and not speed, right? And so we know that we need direction, and that's the piece that's missing. And so the way I think about it, radical product thinking is that thing that gives you that direction so that we can align all of these arrows in our organizations. And so that's what radical product thinking is about. It's this methodology for building world-changing products, and it gives organizations the step-by-step and very practical approach. So the idea, right, is I mentioned at the very beginning that one thing that I appreciated from my engineering education is this idea that we can be systematic in how we do things. That's the whole point of engineering. And so, even in terms of engineering change, we can be systematic about it. And that means starting with a very clear vision for what's the end state we bring about. Just translating that into an actionable set of steps. That's the strategy. Then into a set of decisions, right? That's our priorities. And then into lean and agile execution, so that we can be hypothesis driven and measure what matters. And then finally, we can use all of these ideas to also engineer the culture that we want to bring about. And you'll see as I talk about this methodology that, it's really designed as a set of practical tools that we can use to communicate within our organizations and bring everyone with us on the journey. And so I want to give you a taste of what I mean by this, right? Because a lot of the words that I use, you've heard these words before. And so by now you're thinking, look, I've heard vision. Yes, of course, we all need a vision. What's new in this? And so what I want to challenge is how we write vision statements and how we think about what is a good vision today, right? Because what we've learned is a good vision has to be a BHAG or a big, hairy, audacious goal, that it has to be this short slogan that everyone can remember, right? And that's why we end up with vision statements like this. I mentioned at Lobby 7, our vision was to revolutionize, but I've just as well heard, to empower, to be the leader in, to disrupt, which is my pet peeve personally. And you end up with vision statements like this. And this one in particular happens to be the vision of a public company. It reads, contributing to human progress by empowering people to express themselves. And this vision, right, I want to use it as an example to say, why is this vision not good? It's because anything goes under this vision. I'll give you an example. This vision can fit the vision for my kid's piano teacher. She empowers my kids to express themselves and therefore contributes to human progress. Feel free to, by the way, share ideas in chat if you have other ideas for what this vision could represent. I'll throw out another idea, which is that this could be the vision statement for a company that makes Post-its, right? Because Post-its empower people to express themselves. It could be for social media, for a company that makes stickers, right? But the problem with this vision basically is anything goes. So if I hold up a feature or an opportunity against this vision, the answer to everything is yes, whereas a North Star should sometimes tell you no. And that's why this vision is not good. And so what is a good vision like? It's one that is very detailed, and it has to articulate the answers to 5 questions. The first is, whose world are we trying to change? And it can't just be all consumers or, just all women, for example. It can't be that broad. It has to be very specific. The second question is, what is their problem? What are they trying to do today? Why does that status quo need changing? Because maybe it doesn't. And frankly, if it doesn't need changing, right? If we don't have a clear answer to this, there's no reason for that product or business to exist. Then we can ask, well, what is the world that we envision? Meaning, what does the world look like when you can say mission accomplished? And then finally, we can talk about how we're going to bring this about. This is our product, our technology, our approach, etc. So we have to answer the who, what, why, when, how questions. And what I found is, right, even if you have to answer this, but when you start with a blank sheet of paper, there's someone I know who calls it the 5-minute meditation. The moment you see a blank sheet of paper, you have nothing to say. And so your mind just clears, and so it's not useful, right? And so we developed this Mad Lib statement to be able to really help you not focus on the words, but rather the profound answers to these really deep questions. So here's what the vision statement for my startup would sound like. And I don't think I have this vision statement in the book, actually. So it would read like this for my startup. Today, when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they're likely to like, they have to find attractive looking wine bottles or find wines that are on sale. This is unacceptable because it leads to so many disappointments, and it's hard to learn about wine this way. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix. We are bringing about this world through a recommendations algorithm that matches wines to your taste, and an operational setup that delivers these wines to your door. Now, the reason I used this example of this wine startup was because I had told you absolutely nothing about this wine startup, but at the end of this, you knew exactly, hopefully, what we were doing and why we were doing it, right? And that's what makes this a radical vision statement. And this is why we need it to be so detailed, because it gives our teams the whole source code. And yay, again, you'll appreciate my nerdy analogies. This gives your team the whole source code for building your product. When you have just this short, pithy statement, that's like giving you the clean build, right? You can't build off of it. The source code is what your team really needs. And so I want to stretch our thinking on product, because until now, and this is the whole point of the book, until now we had always thought about product as just a hardware or software, a digital or a physical thing, right? And instead, anything can be your product if it's your mechanism to create change in the world. And you can apply these ideas of vision, strategy, etc., no matter where you want to create change. And the thing that really impressed me, I lived in Singapore for 2.5 years, just came back in January, is that the whole country of Singapore is built like a product. And the extent to which it's built like a product really hit me, just looking up their history and seeing how far the country has come from the global, it's this economic powerhouse today. And it came from the 1950s, where nobody even thought that the country would survive, that the majority didn't have drinking water or sanitation. It was this tiny struggling island, right? That when it became independent in 1965, it was after a failed merger with Malaysia. And even the first Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, actually was emotional in the first press conference saying, well, all my life, I thought Singapore's place in the world was with Malaysia. Like no one thought this country could survive. But he had a vision, right? And his vision, the change he wanted to bring about was creating a better life for Singapore. And Singapore was his product to bring about that change. And he literally talked about it like a product. He said he wanted to produce a first world oasis in a third world region. He wanted to create a platform for businesses to explore the region. And so, a vision is just the first step. That's great. So they had a vision, but then they really needed a strategy. And in the radical product thinking way, RDCL, or radical, is just a mnemonic. And in this case, we ask, the R stands for real pain points. What do these businesses from the West need in such an oasis, right? Then we think of what does the solution look like? That's the design. Capabilities is where we say, well, how do we deliver these? How do we deliver on the power of this design? What's our special sauce to be able to deliver on that power of the design? And then we talk about logistics, which is how will we actually deliver this product to the customers? That's where we think about our pricing model, the business model, how we support it, etc. And so I won't go through all of this. I'll just go through one line. In the case of Singapore, right, businesses coming from the West, it needed to be super easy for these businesses to communicate. So in terms of the design, English needed to be the official language. But let's think of so many countries which after colonialism, it sparked civil war when one language was picked over others. In Singapore, there was so much ethnic diversity. There were Chinese, Tamils, Malays. And so what they did was, in terms of capabilities, they really had to invest in language education, get people to buy into why English was the business language. Till today, Tamil, Chinese, and Malay are still recognized as official mother tongues. And then finally, in terms of logistics, they had to fund a lot of this education, the infrastructure. They had to figure out how they were going to enforce rules, etc. And so finally, in terms of priorities, right, this is where you actually balance the long term against the short term. And so very often, in our businesses, we have a vision and strategy, but it doesn't feature in our everyday decisions. And so this is where the prioritization comes in, where we need to share our intuition for how do we make decisions? How do you actually bring your vision into your decisions? And the way you do that, right, is you think about X and Y axes, where your vision is the long term and your short term is your survival. And so things that are good for both the vision and survival, that's of course ideal. But if you always focus on ideal, right, we're still just being very myopic and short-term driven. So sometimes we have to invest in the vision. And this is where it's good for the vision, but it's not helping us survive in the short term. And I'll give you examples of this, but like in software, the example of this is if you have to refactor code for 3 months. And the opposite of investing in the vision is when you're building vision debt. This is like technical debt, except it's on the vision side. And it's when you're starting to take on obsessive sales disorder, by the way, when you're doing things to win that big deal to survive, but it's not good for your vision. So then you're building vision debt. And so it's not to say you never do vision debt or never take it on, but you just have to be careful in taking it on, right? So to give you an example, what Singapore did is, in investing in the vision, they declared independence, but that alone was not enough because any country could have come and gobbled them up as the struggling island. And so they had to do things in the other quadrants. So they built alliances with other countries. And in terms of vision debt, they created an army, which wasn't necessarily good for the vision, but it was helping them survive. And then they built other features. One interesting one is like creating access to drinking water. That helps them survive, and it's good for the vision. When Singapore became independent, 70% of their water came from Malaysia. Today, Singapore is on track to becoming self-sufficient. Today, 70% of its water comes from within Singapore. And so the last thing I want to convey is that Singapore was really built as a radical product, right? It was built very systematically. And That's what I mean by creating change systematically, that we need to start with this really clear vision for the end state we bring about and translate that systematically into action. And so finally, you can get hold of the book. You can also get the free toolkit, by the way, from the website. It's on radicalproduct.com. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, or of course, you can look me up on the MIT alumni database as well. And I would love to hear
so much, Radhika. This was great. I think it will help everybody get a good feeling for the book for those who have not read it. And I think now what we're going to do is maybe stop the recording and open it up so that people can ask questions. So let me first stop the recording.